I'm Andrew Bolis. I've worked in marketing for 15 years. In my last full-time role, I was a CMO at a Series B tech company. Currently, I'm a business growth consultant. I build marketing programs that help B2B companies acquire new customers and grow their revenue. I'm based in the US out of Chicago. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I try to host a different LinkedIn audio event every week. Alon, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
So hi everyone, my name is Alon, as you probably know. I have been a B2B marketer for more than 15 years now and served as VP Marketing or CMO in my last three roles. Similar to Andrew, I'm a fractional CMO and business growth consultant for the past 2.5 years. And I'm helping companies, whether it's early stage or scale up, to build and execute go-to-market strategies to accelerate their revenue growth. And then,
Yeah, hi. I feel like the odd one out here because I'm less on the marketing side, though I have worked in sales and marketing positions previously. But no, I'm a conversion copywriter and messaging strategist. I work mostly with SaaS and tech companies, both local and overseas, because I found working on conversion focused project conversion optimization projects, a lot of the struggles that I saw clients were having, it's not just that the page wasn't converting because the layout wasn't right or they weren't describing things in the right way, but they were even just saying the wrong things in the first place. So messaging is figuring out what you need to say in order to bring people to you, and then copywriting is how you say that in order to make them convert. So it's a bit of a really interesting area, and I find it's fascinating. I get to meet so many amazing people building amazing products. It just blows my mind. So I feel very lucky to be doing this for a living.
great. Thanks for your intro, Ed. So I think that let's get right into it. You probably know positioning gets less attention than other marketing activities, but the thing is that this is exactly what you need to make your buyers notice you and buy from you in any economic climate. In today's event, and then we'll explain why you need positioning and how you can adapt it to meet the evolving market changes and buyers' needs.
Thank you, Alon. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive into the topic. So Eden, let's start talking about positioning and start with defining it. So what is positioning? What is not positioning?
Absolutely. From my experience, positioning is about the perception that you hold in your target audience's mind. So it's about what they think. Again, it's a lot of people get it confused sometimes with just what a brand is meant to be. Now, branding is one element of positioning, but it's about that total what people think about you. Again, so to do positioning is either to double down and reinforce what your audience already thinks and believes about you or your product, or it's to redefine what they think about you and your product. So the active positioning is about taking your company's vision, your product's benefits, your industry or niche, and as well as your customers' understanding of what you do, comparing it to what your competitors are doing to ensure positioning is different enough and stands out so that it earns your audience attention and you can occupy a place in their mind. If someone can't get you out of your head, you're living rent free in their head forever. So always remember, think of you favorably and about in today's day and age, it's not necessarily that if their attention spans are short, but their consideration spans are really short. So if they know you and they trust you and they recognize you and they understand who you are and what you stand for and what the value is that your product can deliver, then it's going to be very easy for them to say yes to you when they are ready to convert. So positioning itself is not branding by itself. It's not a tagline, an ad. It's not the colors. It's not a marketing campaign, but those are activities and assets that can help you cement or change your positioning. But the assets alone just don't define what your positioning is.
I totally agree with you, and I think that how I see it is that at the end of the day, marketing is a battle of perception, not of a product, and that's why exactly this is why you need the positioning. And your point about looking at others' positioning is spot on, because we also have to make sure that we position ourselves differently. And this is why it's so essential for us to conduct competitor research and not to copy obviously not to copy their marketing, but to learn about their positioning and products and make sure that we are saying it differently.
100%. I absolutely agree.
And Eden, I like your point too about attentions, because I think these days you're always competing for attention, whether you're doing it in a category or an industry or just in general. Having the right positioning, I'm sure, makes you memorable, and I'm sure makes you come first to mind for the right prospect or the right customer. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you just a small example. I'm working with a client now that they have a plugin for e-commerce websites, and there are a million plugins that all basically do the same thing as they do. But the difference that they have is they have this incredible platform on the back end that actually handles a lot of the logistics related to e-commerce that none of these other plugins like actually take care of it or whatsoever. They're not communicating that at all. So they really, in order to position themselves and differentiate on that level, they really need to be highlighting what it is that they specialize, how they do it differently. They need to be communicating that value to their audience. And so it's a plugin, but it's more than just a plugin. So people don't take it at face value, that they understand that there's really something very powerful here that can actually help them with their businesses.
Yeah, I really like that example, and I think that's a great area to pick too, because there is a lot of competition and a lot of other choices. So Eden, let's then sort of transition into the 3 ways to adapt your positioning to evolving market changes and buyers' needs, and how to do that without changing your branding.
Right. So one of the things that often comes up is people sometimes get scared to talk about positioning, or think that positioning is a really scary thing, because it means that you have to change up all your branding, and you don't necessarily, at least not in the beginning, unless you find that the new position, one of the new venues of positioning is bringing you much greater revenue as a result, and then you might want to consider doing it. But so I'll just give you a quick to help illustrate this better before I get into the 3 examples. I'll just share a quick short story about what I mean about this. A while back, when we had very young kids, one was toilet training, one was a baby, we were looking for a wet vacuum, basically for all the fabrics in our house, so couches, carpets, all those things. A wet vacuum is very good to have on hand when you have lots of small children. Spilled food and other types of fluids. I'm not going to go there. But so we were looking for a wet vacuum, and my husband did a bunch of Googling, and he found something, and he said, it says it's for pets, but it says it's for wet things. It's for vacuuming up liquid. So I assume it would apply to a use case. He ends up going to the shop, and he talks to the salesperson about it. And the salesperson said, I don't know if it could work for your use case. It probably will, but I have to sell it as something for pets. And my husband looked at him like, are you serious? There are so many people I know who would buy this if you could just say you can use it. It's a great fit for people with growing families. And he said, no, the company said that you have to advertise it for pets. So we got one, and it is hands down one of the best investments we ever made. We have a bunch of kids. We've all gone through all the stages of growing up, and now they spill things less, so it gets less use. But it's still been a huge investment. And we actually wanted to gift one to some friends a while ago who also had some small children. We wanted to give one as a thoughtful gift. And the vendor was actually not selling them anymore because he was struggling to shift the product. And I firmly believe that if he had the opportunity to position it not just as something for pets to clean up pet messes, because I say it's a great fit for this much wider target audience of people with small children, I imagine that they would have had, the product didn't change functionally. Nothing about the product changed. It would be enough to just change the photo that they were advertising it with of a golden retriever to a baby, and people would get it. But you didn't have to rebrand you didn't have to change the product, you didn't have to change its features or anything, but you could still talk about it almost functionally in almost the exact same way. It was still the same product, but the whole perception of how useful it is and how effective it's going to be and how often people are going to use it changes immediately when you change the positioning for it. And so I'm really sad that they were struggling to sell that, because I really felt very strongly that they were just aiming it for the wrong target audience. So that's just a way of illustrating, again, you can potentially adapt to positioning to meet evolving market changes and buyers' needs without necessarily having to redo the logo or redo the colors or redo everything. It can be as simple enough as releasing a new marketing campaign. For example, we're the baby and a couple of parents instead of a golden retriever next to this wet vacuum. So there are a couple of different ways that you can use to help change audience's existing perception of the company or the product without having to go through that rebrand. And there are a couple of different things, narrative elements that we can call out. So first one is, for example, tapping into consumer rituals. So have understanding, how does your product practically fit into your consumers' existing daily life? Like how they work, where they work, when they work, in a believable way. It's like people used to imagine that they wouldn't wake up in the morning and go, Alexa, put on the air conditioning or turn off the heat or things, but they do now. So one of the ways that we're able to help integrate products like that was to show how easily or in a believable way they could fit easily into someone's routine and actually help them. So by tapping into consumer rituals, showing how your product fits seamlessly into someone's daily life makes it very easy for them to understand how it's able to help you. Another element is to celebrate the ingredients. So what are the key elements that make up your product? Are there one or two of those elements that really differentiate your product from others in the same category or niche? Sometimes changing the focus slightly from saying it's an all-in-one to saying it does one thing really well, it can be absolutely profound. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember which company it was. I'm going to kick myself afterwards after I remember after this event. There was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Eugene Schwartz talking with a beer company way back in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, and one of the and the company was trying to describe what was so different about their beer, and there was literally nothing was different between this beer or anything else. But when Eugene Schwartz went on this tour of the factory where the beer was being made, of the brewery, sorry, where the beer was being made, he asked how was the filtration process, how was this, and they said we use all natural spring water from just a mountain somewhere. And so that became, no one else was talking about that. No one else was talking about how pure the filtered water was that was going into the creation of the beer. So they actually just focused on using that, and that ended up helping position the beer. And they kept using that line. They ended up changing they ended up actually following down that and changing their line and everything they're changing their branding to better support that in the future, because it drove their sales up like crazy. Functionally, the beer is the same beer. Nothing changed about the beer. Nothing changed about about how it was actually in taste or quality relevant to anyone else in the market. They simply focused people's attention on one ingredient and celebrated how it was being made, rather than trying to oversell it. And I think the one other way that you can adapt the positioning is to focus on telling the creation story. So what is the aha moment that the founder had that sparked the urge to create this company? How was the first iteration made? The second iteration, was this a work of a solo genius or a team of experts? How is that current product using that momentum to deliver excellence for its customers? So sometimes, and again, the creation story should be part and parcel of with the branding and the messaging of the company, but sometimes it's just not told enough or told well enough. So just, again, it's about focusing on these elements, these things that make up the product. It's able to help you adapt even when times are difficult economically.
I really like it. And I just have a quick one. I think that we also can adjust our positioning by talking directly to your buyers, especially now that most of them are not willing to open their wallet easily. And so we can better understand what makes them tick. And by the way, I think that a great book, I just crossed my mind right now, that a great book that to consider is one of my customers really did a great job with that, is Building a Story Brand. If I'm not mistaken, there is by Donald Miller. And in this book, you have a very simple 7-step framework for positioning, but the approach is more from the storytelling perspective. I think it's aligned with your last point about your creation story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of companies that fail to tell just that story, and we know we know that people connect to stories. We know that it's much easier to communicate information and to absorb information, to retain information when it's told in the form of a story. So often just telling the same product features but wrapping it up in a narrative can help shift the audience's perception of your product's positioning.
By the way, Ada, do you think when you talk about the story you tell, you ties back to the strategic narrative? Is that what you mean?
So again, strategic narrative, brand story, a lot of these terms get tossed around quite a bit. They are very different things when you look at it from a tactical perspective. The brand story is very close to the creation story, why this product exists or where we came about to be. But the strategic narrative is your business strategy wrapped up in the form of a compelling short story. So that is, it's the business strategy. It's what's happening in the world, what's the problems that have arisen as a result, how we're actively solving those problems, and then what's the change that it's driving in the world as a result, like as a result of our activities and what we're building or doing here. How is that impacting them in the world as a whole? So I think it's very different things. Again, I'm not saying you have to necessarily go in and rewrite the strategic narrative, but it's simply sometimes shifting the focus or emphasizing one element of that's contained in that strategic narrative more than another can be enough to help shift the focus. Robert Cialdini talks about it a lot in his book Persuasion. Dr. Cialdini, behavioral scientist, he talks about a lot in his book Persuasion about how shifting the focus, from a psychology perspective, when we shift our focus onto something, we give it much more weight and much more emphasis. So positioning is that act of shifting the audience focus from one element to another of the product.
And Eden, I think too, the stories you share about positioning and the specific companies and products make the topic a lot more approachable, because I've seen the phrase positioning being thrown around a lot and used a lot, but I don't think I've heard it explained this clearly or succinctly before.
It's a scary thing, right? Because I think a lot, as I mentioned before, a lot of people see it as something scary, and it is if you need to reposition the company as a whole or they've never done, it's a startup and they've never done positioning before and they don't know where to begin, or it's a mid-market company that needs to reposition because now they're growing up to the enterprise or any other situation. It's scary, of course, because there's lots of things that are changing at the same time, and the success that got you to this point doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to carry on into the next phase, but you're hoping to, and that's why you're doing positioning. But we're not talking about repositioning companies as a whole. It's about, you have a product, you have an audience. It's about, there are sometimes, again, things are happening in the world, and sometimes it's a matter of shifting a point of focus. So you have a strong positioning, but it's about shifting the focal point from the audience, or shifting their perception of the product from one way to another. You can say it's the way that Liquid Death does. Like when they go totally against the grain and they make fun of the reviews that hate of their bad reviews. They make such fun of their bad reviews and they turn those into marketing campaigns. Like the product has never changed. Nothing's ever changed. They've collected bad reviews, but now they're using that review to poke fun of it. And as a result, they're changing the audience's perception of them as a company. So that's still on brand. So they're taking that and they're actually following through with that. But they're shifting the focus from the review to saying, yeah, we can poke fun at that.
Cool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that example.
So I think that now, sorry, so you want to proceed?
Yeah, so Eden, let's transition then towards the last part, how to best communicate your positioning.
Yeah, absolutely. So best thing is, of course, through words. Words are what's most important. But this can be in the form of positioning deck, which is really useful for internal use. It's driving internal alignment. So what I mean by that, it's a very brief, you keep it to 3 to 10 Google slides, something that contain a positioning statement, something short and sweet, something that says, we were used to position this way, but now we're going to focus attention on this way, the reasons why. This has changed because how it helps you relate better to your target audience. The value proposition, the value that you're delivering, that still ties into that positioning, and any key phrases that you now need to communicate as a team as a result of the change in positioning. And a best way is, for example, just the next marketing campaigns. Again, just going back to Liquid Death example, they got some bad reviews. Okay, so they actually turned that into a marketing campaign. But You can start experimenting with that positioning, start testing that positioning rather on your target audience immediately, whether you start in cold outreach emails, in some ads or landing pages, or a mix of all above. Start trying to feed in those key messages and phrases and see how the audience responds to the ads in terms of conversions, and see how prospects on sales calls respond as well. Like an example, I was working with a company recently in the US. They had this amazing done for you video testimonial service, amazing, with high, insane quality production, and it doesn't cost nearly as much as hiring a full production agency with a creative director and everything. Like amazing quality work for what they deliver for a great price. They wanted to shift to selling packages and to sell continuous packages throughout the year instead of just a one and done kind of thing. So we looked at their positioning and we realized the way that they were talking about it, like it was a one and done thing. Whereas really, to get testimonial videos, it should be an ongoing investment in the company's, as part of the company's marketing budget, getting these high quality testimonial videos produced. So we shifted that narrative. We didn't change anything about the product. Is still the same. Everything's absolutely the same, but we shifted again that perception. They got a positioning deck and they started using those key messages in their sales calls, and the VP of revenue said, we have seen it's much easier to close them because they understand that value. They see that there is value now in the way we talk about how it's not a one and done thing. So it's simple, just enough drawing people's attention to the right things, focusing their attention on the right things at the right time. It changes the positioning, enables you to charge more or charge less if you want to, but enables you to charge more to win more customers, and it makes it much easier for them to close as well.
Yes, great points. I think that I'm talking about in the head of marketing leaders. I think that we can even take it a step further by presenting it to an entire company, so everyone is on the same page, because I think that this is part of your brand strategy that should be communicated across the company, not just to the marketing team. And this is and as a marketing leader, when you present it, most people will hear about it and digest, and it is something that I think that as a VP marketing team, it's your role to make sure that everyone is aligned with that.
I definitely agree with that, Alon, but I would say it's more when you're looking at potentially repositioning the company or the product as a whole. If you're looking to first, again, you're responding quickly. If, again, we were talking about the example before of what can you do potentially without changing your branding, without changing the entire narrative across everything. Make sure, of course, C-suite is involved and that they're aware of this, but it's more for the marketing and sales to get alignment on it, to start testing that out before, if you need to decide if it's a permanent change that we need to make, or we're going to roll it out across the entire organization, but at least to get some things moving. There's some experimenting with messaging that they can do, testing with messaging, which messages seem to resonate with people more. I think if the company doesn't necessarily need to change its entire positioning. If we need to change entire positioning, absolutely. If the company itself is not positioned right, then we need to look at much deeper, and everyone in the organization should be involved. Or informed at least.
Yeah, this is a great part. I totally agree.
And I like the idea too of doing it as a marketing campaign, because I think that's a great way to introduce it. That's a great way to roll it out, and it's not it doesn't sound like a threatening or as challenging as, hey, we're going to just redo everything the company has been doing.
Mm-hmm.